And we are live.
Thank you, Katie. Good afternoon and welcome everybody to the work session for one of the work sessions for this month. And for today's work session, we'll receive the presentation from the Neighborhood and Business Development Department from Commissioner, the hardest working man in City Hall building, Commissioner Gary Kirkmeyer.
I second that, Madam President.
To get an update on what we're doing there. Commissioner Kirkmeyer, you want to start us off?
Thank you, President Scott, Vice President Lightfoot. Appreciate that. So before we get started, I know you know our senior team, but we have a couple other guests with us today, and I want to introduce Jill Simons. I think you've met Jill before, but I want to reintroduce. Jill is leading our land management project, and she'll give an update on that. We have Kelly Maturko, the city's policy director with us today, Elizabeth Murphy from our planning office, and Leah Anselm from our housing unit. You'll hear from all of them. So let me share real quick. It's a quick presentation, but we can take it at whatever pace you want in terms of questions. So the agenda is we'll give an update on land management. We'll talk a little bit about the report that you got that was for the end of January for the CARES Act funding. We've got some exciting things going on with creating owner occupancies. We want you to be aware of all those efforts and what are about to be coming down the pipe. We're going to talk about where we're at with the vacancy survey. We'll talk about some of those challenges. Leah's going to talk about the Anti-Displacement Learning Network grant and the Housing First Trust Fund. A new addition, I put this on yesterday, 151 Mount Hope. It wasn't on the original email I sent to Conda. That's because we've got some pretty exciting potential development news there that we want to get you up to speed with and make sure you're on board with that. And then lastly, just talk about what's of interest to you. I know I think Josanne mentioned that you wanted to talk about at some point in one of our quarterly sessions, the development process, but I want to talk more through that a little more to get clarity on what you want to talk about so we can prepare ourselves properly. So I'll start by kicking it off to Jill to give an update on land management.
Thanks, Commissioner, and it's good to see everybody. So just as a reminder, land management is a project we've been talking about a little bit for a while now, and it's the project to replace our legacy software that we use in NBD and in other departments across the city with new software. So the primary areas it's going to touch are our permit office and permitting, our licensed trade professionals, building inspections and code enforcement, a couple of other bits and pieces in there too, but it's really a big project to modernize some of the way that we do things currently. So the status of things currently, we'll come back again and again to keep you up to date on what's going on with this project. But the biggest thing was last month, we came to council to get authority to enter into an agreement with the vendor that we've chosen. So we've made it all the way through the selection process, and we're ready to sign that, get that agreement sorted out. So the agreement's almost finalized, and we're looking to kick off the next phase of the project shortly, and that'll be the implementation phase where we actually roll up our sleeves and start building this thing out so that it works for us here in Rochester. Implementation obviously entails, working out the technical side for us, but it also is going to entail the people side. And so we've started with a change champion team with staff and NBD to bring people together, share information, identify issues and barriers as they come up, and keep people in the loop. So we're going to plan a kickoff sort of party event with NBD to get that thing going, and our change champion team is going to be a part of that. Also on the people side, we have a new person in our staff, and that's Brandon Dowdy. He was hired recently as our system administrator, so the NBD IT sort of lead on the project, and he's coming to us from general code, which is something we're all familiar with. That's where our legislation lives. So he's familiar with local government. He brings a lot of energy and technical expertise, and we're thrilled to have him as part of our team. And then, getting ready to start the build phase or the implementation phase. We're doing a lot of work around data migration to get ready. I kind of think of it as packing up the old house to get ready to move into the new house. We need to figure out what we're bringing and what we're going to give to, get rid of. And we have to make sure all the boxes are labeled appropriately so we can figure out where everything's moving. So there's a lot of pieces there to figure out how to move from one to the other. And that's a bulk of the work we're working on at the moment. Once we formally kick off with the vendor, it'll be about 16 months to implement, so we're fully live. So we're really getting close to that phase of the project where it's going to really pick up speed, and you'll start to see some of those bits come, roll out. So it's an exciting point to be at. We're at the cusp of the next phase, and that's all I have to share for right now.
Yeah, I just give you a little bit of 2 cents from my perspective. Having been around for the 12 years we've been waiting to kick off this project. Back in 2008, we really stuck our necks out in terms of technology advancements and took, inspectors that never touched computers before, and all of a sudden overnight had them working in the field with pen tablet products and wireless connectivity, and got rid of all our paper and had scanning documents and SharePoint electronic data warehouse. And we did so in a very aggressive manner because we anticipated at that point, 3 years from then, we would be looking at front-end solutions. Well, here we are 12 years later. So we're really blessed that the mayor's supporting of the project. Albert IT has been fantastic. Our new PMO has been fantastic. And we're really excited about this project, as difficult as it's going to be. Oh, let me get back to the next screen here. So you all have the update from the end of January and the CARES Act funding. Just to give you a high level summary, to date, we've received $12.7 million through the CARES Act funding from HUD. And of that, all but $446,000 has been appropriated. That even includes the $6 million in Treasury that you just approved at your last council session to allocate to the county in our collective efforts, countywide, city-county effort to deal with rent assistance. Of the money that's been appropriated to date, $4 million has been invoiced. And of that, you can see the benefits that have been, received by the public. 538 businesses have been assisted. We've served over 20,000 meals to seniors, to over 2,800 seniors. Over 1,300 families have been assisted with legal assistance in the form of eviction prevention and homelessness. We've had over 3,700 seniors that were assisted in an aging in place environment. Over 2,900 laptops delivered to city students, and over 1,800 low-income households assisted with emergency shelter, rapid rehousing outreach. Carrying on, 23 foreclosures were prevented with these funds. 60 rental units are in the process of being rehabbed to be occupied by a resident at or below 60% AMI. That was our landlord grant. 16 owner occupants have been assisted through these funds with emergency repairs, and 40 individual families with HIV have been assisted in the form of rent assistance or permanent housing. Initially, we thought on this last bullet that we were going to have this virtual community update on March 11th. That's now been set for hopefully March 25th. We're trying to arrange for it to be March 25th as part of that Thursday community update series. That's because we anticipate the next phase of the rent assistance to start on or about March 29th. So that's where we're at with that right now. And more to come as soon as there's more information. So this I've been wanting to talk about for a while. We've been delayed in a lot of this because of the choice program, which I'll give you an update in a second about. But that wasn't, we're not sitting by just waiting for that. We've done a lot of incremental things to make gains in terms of creating owner occupancies for our residents, starting with the city surplus sealed bid auction that, ended up in hopefully nine potential owner occupant situations as we gave preference to people that were going to occupy the property over investors. That'll be a trend that we carry on into the future at subsequent sales. We have a home roster program. We think 5 units are going to be done even despite the challenges this year. And then, the land bank, for those of you that might not be intimately familiar with land bank activity, I think it's something we should talk more about. The potential for the land bank is untapped. I mean, it's really limitless. It's only limited by the funding and access to resources that we have. So we want to keep strengthening that. And so to date, we have partnerships with Housing Development Corp, Habitat. We anticipate rehabs. So the top part is existing structures. I should have started there. The bottom part, we'll talk about new construction. So existing structures, we expect 13 rehabs from our housing partners. We have an effort going on that's been going on for 2 years now, I think, where when we acquire property in the land bank and it's occupied, we first engage the occupants to see if they want to become owners. And that has really proven to be something that we didn't think was as possible as it has proven to be. And a lot of it has to do with the condition of the property, but we've been focusing that effort on 1 and 2 families. We started with 2 families primarily because we think that, and we support the fact that not only does that empower a resident to become a property owner, but it also helps them build capacity to handle the maintenance going forward if they have a rental unit that they can get rent from. So we're trying to build wealth, empower people to become owner occupants that haven't had that opportunity in the past. And it's really, we actually have one in the works right now that Paul is working on in real estate. So we're going to do that as often as the residents allow us to do that.
Commissioner,
yeah.
Do you want to entertain questions by section?
Yeah.
Or
Yeah, we
go
can
through the whole thing?
No. We can talk as we go. It's not that long a presentation.
Okay, Councilmember Lubian.
Sure. So I know you had talked about, Commissioner, being able to prioritize owner occupants, and you were thinking about doing that for local buyers as well. I guess I'm unclear. There's 2 types of auctions, yes? Auctions of city-owned property and then auctions of tax foreclosures?
Right, tax foreclosure auction, we don't have any authority in. That's basically a process to collect taxes.
Okay.
So it's high bidder process. Now, what we do have is we have the land bank that has the authority to use this, super bid to take properties into the land bank without bidding, without competing bidding.
So we have our owner occupant auction, or our city-owned property auction that we do have control over, maybe who we prioritize.
To the extent that we do, yes. I don't know how far we can go with that, but we're trying to go as far as we can with it.
Yeah, and then the land bank can take properties from the tax foreclosure auction and put them in that city-owned property list.
So the land bank, they wouldn't be in city ownership if they go into the land bank. The land bank is a separate entity, so the land bank would own it. Now, to date, in the way that we have structured that relationship, the land bank has to have a plan for those properties, either cash on hand to pay that tax debt or a partnership that we have prearranged that have expressed an interest in that property.
And those are people like the Land Trust and Habitat?
Yeah, all of our development partners, yep.
Okay, thanks.
Yep. So on the existing structures, we again, when we have an occupied property and we're hoping to get more involved with occupied properties, the way that the land bank was actually able to get involved with occupied properties is because the mayor allocated some funds to the land bank, because prior to that, the land bank only had attorney general funds from land bank grants, and those were restricted and limited to vacant properties. So we didn't have any opportunity to get occupied properties before that. And the real beauty in that is, on average, an occupied property is in better shape than a vacant property. And so if we have an occupied property and we have a tenant that's so interested in becoming an owner, it really sets us up to really empower them to become an owner at a minimal cost. And of course, we would take them through any other programs we have in terms of home buyer, rehab grants, and everything else that we have available. And then on the existing structure side, we also have development partners who also rehab properties, and in addition to the Housing Development Corp and Habitat. And the new construction side, this is where we're kind of focusing some of our new effort or plan to. We have our Habitat program. I'm not sure if they'll get to 10 this year because of the pandemic, but that's typically what they want to do in a year. We have Neighborhood Builders program. That's basically, almost the same as our Home Rochester program with the partnership. And then what's really transitioning here, and this really can give you a clear indication of, where we're going as a city in terms of, attracting this kind of sale opportunity, is these are 13 private market rate, new construction residential dwellings that are going up as we speak. And aside from things like, the development projects that we had on Genesee and off Atlantic, that was never seen in I can't even remember the last time that we had this going on prior to those, aside from those two projects, which, had some assistance from the city on. So that, there is a really, really attractive market we have right now, and we know it. And so that brings us to the last bullet of new construction. And this is where we're really trying to get the most bang for our buck going forward. So Choice, we had the expansion of Choice through council outside of Center City, and it was supported by Comida. But where it's at right now with Comida is it's still dependent on a large development on one parcel. So in other words, if you build 5 units on one parcel, even if you subdivide them thereafter, you can take advantage of the Choice program. And Matthew Danker did on Marsh Street. And so did Joe Barrett at 3 units on South Plymouth. But what we want and what we're pushing for, and what Corporation Counsel sent a notice to Comida's attorneys, was we want and we need that application to scattered site development. Why? Because that's what our lots are. They're scattered. They're not all neatly on one parcel. And so our argument is that, when you look at the intent and the purpose of this Choice program, which really started as a jobs program back in the day and transitioned to, mixed use and residential as long as it was 3 or more units, our argument is that we think that 3 individual lot dwellings is even more impactful on the neighborhood than 1 3-unit on the corner. So, we're going to keep making that argument. I think we're anticipating Comida setting up a meeting for us to present to their governance committee. I hope that happens soon. As soon as that happens, we have parcels that we have been holding, and we have enormous amounts of inquiry from residents and from builders and from developers that want to build owner occupancies on our lots. So there's going to be a lot of fast-paced things going on once we close the loop on the Choice. We'll probably end up having a meeting with developers, builders, and make sure everybody understands that even our Habitat program, our Home Rochester program, they'll be able to take advantage of this as well, which further impacts that person's ability to be successful because it gives tax abatement in a declining manner over 10 years. So that allows that person to put some money away. So when the taxes are at full 10 years from then, they have some cash stashed away, if you will. And then you're all familiar with our home buyer assistance program. That's a fantastic opportunity, and lots of people take advantage of that.
Gary, can I ask a question about Choice?
Yeah.
Just to make sure that I understand. So the only thing that's preventing us from utilizing the Choice benefit for single family scattered sites is approval by Comida.
Yeah, well, we had to do a lot of investigation in terms of stating our claim to, why we think that that's a justifiable action or justifiable path to go. And on our conversations at the state level and in our investigation, we saw a direct connection to, a commercial in the form of 3 or more units. So we wanted to stay true to that. But again, we think the impact, which is economical and from a community development perspective, it definitely is what we need to raise our neighborhoods. We have a pretty good case of making an argument that, again, 3 lots with 3 dwellings is more impactful than 1 3-unit townhouse. And so that's, we're really comfortable in that position. It's supported by Corporation Counsel. And I believe it's just going to be a matter of presenting and getting the stamp of approval, but we'll see.
Great. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I would really hope that if the county has discretion over that, that ultimately they agree. And if for some reason it has to go to the state level, I hope that we can get all the legislative bodies to be able to be in unison on that.
Yeah, it doesn't have to go to the state. It's just COMETA, basically what it is think of it this way, like when the two projects I referenced before, the 5-unit and 3-unit went there, they went there as one parcel, and then subsequent to that, them receiving that benefit, then it's parceled out when the parcels get subdivided to each individual owner. This is just doing that from the get-go, but what I'm envisioning we have to do is we'll probably have to dispose of our lots in groups of threes to the people that are interested in taking advantage of that. So what we would do is we would probably promote that if you want to be in this business and you want to, because we're going to be prioritizing people that are creating owner occupancy, and we're going to further incentivize people at 60% or below AMI with some subsidy. So we want to be able to say, we want them to be successful in building, but we also want to get our residents into it at a price point that they can get into it. And oh, by the way, you get this tax benefit on top of it. So we're really excited about it, and we're looking forward to, getting approval and moving on.
Thanks.
I think it'll be pretty fast after that. So we wanted to just give you an update on the rental survey. We'll talk about some of the challenges. I'll talk a little bit about this, but then I'll kick it over to Kelly and Elizabeth, who will talk more about the methodology that the consultant's using. So the consultant is, I believe you're aware, Mullen and Lonergan. That's the same consultant that did the con plan. And this contract with them is an extension of their work in the con plan. The current status, we're still sorting through some of the weeds of identifying which parcels should be included. I wish it was easier given the limitations of our mainframe system, but it is a painfully manually intensive, laborious process because we have to go in back to permits and see, when did this become a 6-family? Did it become a 6-family after 74? And then therefore it wouldn't qualify, So here's the eligibility requirements. Basically, it's to include buildings built before 74 with 6 or more units, except the following. So it doesn't include RHA properties. It doesn't include any properties that involved HCR, which pretty much all of our development projects. And it doesn't involve any property that was built as commercial before 74, but converted to residential after 74. That's last bullet. That's where the rubber meets the road in terms of finding the last of the properties. We're almost there though. So some of the challenges, again, finding the applicable structures. We always have to be concerned, and I think this goes to anybody who's doing a vacancy survey, and any survey, quite frankly, of landlords, is a low response rate. We've had 3 surveys going on with landlords since the pandemic, and I believe the highest response rate was 15%. So somehow we have to figure out how we do better than that. And some of the ways, we'll talk about some of the ways we're going to try to do better than that, but that is a real threat. And then an additional threat is, how do we validate data? Because systematically, we don't really have a mechanism to validate data. We don't track vacant units, we track vacant structures. So we don't have a means to validate one way or another whatever people are attesting to. And now I'll ask Kelly and or Elizabeth to talk about the methodology.
Thanks, Commissioner. And just to add to, in terms of the applicable structures, we highlighted here the main categories that would remove properties from being subject to regulation. There are some other types of properties that also become exempt, some of which we can remove prior to the survey, some of which will be included in the survey process, but then there's the potential that the owner could submit information to HCR to then be removed from regulation. So one example of that is around substantial rehab. So if something meets the criteria from the state to that it has been substantially rehabbed, they would be able to submit that documentation and have HCR approve that it wouldn't meet the requirements to be under the rent stabilization. So there's a lot of layers here, and so we've taken a lot of time to sort through that, and as the Commissioner mentioned, it does take some time to make sure that we are accurately understanding the legislation and the law, and then applying that to the properties that we have using the data that we have available. And so then just going on to the methodology, we've talked a little bit about this in the past, but we have needed to make some revisions just based on some additional review of the consultant. But essentially, we'd be looking at mailing surveys out to the property managers, and potentially giving a heads up to the owners as well. We're sorting through exactly the best way to get to the point of contact who would be most accessible and able to provide us the information on the building. And then there also will be an option to complete the survey online, so that if that's easier for folks, they would be able to do that from their phone or computer. And then, of course, the consultant will be tracking and recording the responses. And then for those folks who don't respond, there'll, of course, be some follow-up phone calls. And so the consultant will support some of that. We've also just discussed recently involving code enforcement officers to help with that effort, knowing that they have, they're very familiar with the neighborhoods and the buildings, and potentially have better contacts with the property managers or owners to be able to get this information. And then, of course, the validation piece is challenging, as the commissioner was mentioning. The consultant has looked at a number of different data sources to try to figure out if there is any publicly available data that could be used to verify the vacancy rate. They've looked at the American Community Survey data. They've looked at Postal Service data. We've also explored Water Bureau data. Unfortunately, the way in which those sources either provide their data, whether they're at the unit level, parcel level, or whether or not they distinguish between the buildings that are eligible for ETPA or not, does make it challenging. And so unfortunately, they found that those sources won't be able to be used to verify the data that is received from the survey responses. One other source we're trying to look into now is our Gini data, to see if there's an opportunity there to explore that as a validation option. And then we don't have an answer on that, but we can follow up when we find out more. And then the consultant is also looking to identify outliers in responses. So assuming if we do get a decent response rate, in order to try to verify if they're seeing in similar areas some rates that are way above or way below, they would focus some efforts on additional follow-up there to verify the information that was provided in the survey. I'll stop there. Elizabeth, is there anything else you want to add on to the methodology?
Not to the methodology, but a sense of timing for this survey, because I know we've bounced it forward and it's been bounced back, and we bounced it forward and said, well, we don't think we should do it. And we said, well, how about January? And then January came and we got to, no, don't think so. Where are we with this time-wise?
So do you guys want to give an update, Kelly? I mean, we're still working through, I mean, the biggest hurdle right now is we have to solidify the list of eligible properties, and we're almost there. So we're digging through that right now. Staff are going property by property for the ones that we don't know for sure yet. And once we get to that point, then it's basically structuring what's the best mechanism to start to reach out to landlords. We have already established a list of what's on, what's we believe qualifies now, and we have pulled out the building owner registry information for each, so that we provided the consultant with some points of contact. We also want to look at that list because not every property has a person registered in the system yet for the building owner registry. So we want to make sure that we manually populate where there's missing data there. So we want to set the consultant up to be able to be successful in trying to be the source that reaches out to them. But we're also willing to play the role of support, like Kelly alluded to, because we know every owner / manager. There isn't a property that we don't have some way of contacting somebody. So especially the 6 unit, the larger multiple. So even if their list has Jane Smith and Jane's no longer associated with it, all we got to do is go into the building information system and we'll know very quickly who the right person is. So, hopefully that combined effort will prove to be worthy of getting a high response rate, but understand there's still a real threat of low response rate. There's not an incentive, right? I mean, what's the incentive?
So does this mean that what constitutes a start of the survey? Because I know you can't tell me anything about a finish until you can tell me about the start.
So Kelly, how long you think before we can pick a date for survey?
Yeah, I mean, we do want to have the methodology finalized first. So I think we want to hear back about we wanted to share this today, obviously, and talk through if there were any other questions or ideas, find out if the RG&E data is available. And if not, then we would finalize the methodology as we've otherwise laid it out. We're actively working on the property list. So I think in a few weeks, we'll have that finalized. So, we are at this point moving the process forward and hope that maybe in a month we would be ready. We had already drafted the survey last year, and we're just making some final tweaks to that. As we continue to look through this, because the law is unfortunately so complicated and the state doesn't put out real detailed guidance for municipalities on what the methodology should be and how they should approach this. We've been learning new things as we go and making sure again that we're just following it as best we can and making sure we understand all the details. So, I'd hope that in a month we would have the list done and the survey finalized. And then, we had initially talked about 3 weeks for responses, but, again, if we are finding very low response rate, we would want to extend that time frame to give folks additional time to respond and do that additional follow-up.
And the other thing, President Scott, is with the upcoming phase 2 of the rent assistance and all of that interest in that, it's I don't know that it's not in our best interest to not force a survey right now, but because I don't know if landlords are over surveyed, quite frankly, but we want to make sure that we get them in a good place and the tenants in a good place on a path of accessing rent assistance. And then, maybe this survey has a role thereafter, which is not far away.
So let's say April 1st, you're off and running, full speed. We'll say that's start. So at the outside, what would you project to be a completion date? And I know I heard all the variables and implications that you mentioned, but just to give us some kind of indication, some kind of framework, what we're dealing with here.
So if it's a 3-week survey, and then based on the results of that survey, we have to anticipate that the consultant's going to have some additional labor intensive work in reaching out to people, and then we will. So I don't know if that's 2 weeks, 3 weeks. It's going to take us some time, depending on how many. We're talking about 600 plus structures here as of today. So some of the cities that have done these surveys had 60 structures. We could do 60 structures in a weekend. But this is a different dynamic. So we want to make sure that we do it right. And it's all going to depend on the response rate. If we get a high response rate, that's less laborious work that has to happen thereafter. So we can't really say it's going to be 1 or 2 weeks. It could be 3 weeks. It could be a month. But we're going to be steadily working that list, whatever it is, once we have the close date of the survey. So say, hypothetically, if we start April 1st and it's a 3-week survey, and then maybe 2 weeks for the consultant to try to reach out to people, and then 2 weeks for us to reach out to people. So maybe the end of April, somewhere in that ballpark.
And just to follow up a little bit in terms of the size and scale of outreach, as the commissioner and Kelly said, we've been working to filter down to have the most accurate list possible of properties to survey that are eligible. And currently there's about 700 properties on that list, which would touch approximately 10,000 units. So depending on the survey response, that could potentially be a lot of follow-up. So it's really going to depend on the response rate at the beginning to give us a sense of what the timing will be to get to a point where we feel okay with the results.
Yeah, if we get a 10% response, 15% response, no way in a month we close that loop. That's a big loop. And at some point, we're going to have to all agree to settle on that's enough effort. We can't do any better than that. But I don't know, if that's a month after survey closes, or it's going to depend on how many we have to reach out to, I think.
Is there any guidance from the state on what is the minimal requirement?
No.
So
Not that we've received, I mean, it was something we've discussed recently is trying to reach back out to the state. And I know Katie and I had emailed about potential contacts there because it is frustrating. We tried initially, when we first started discussing this in 2019, and there really wasn't guidance. We talked to CGR, who did Kingston survey, to get, insight from them, but they also didn't have any guidance from the state. So it just, everybody seems to be kind of on their own and trying to model after each other to the best they can.
So it's not like if the survey starts and the response rate is abysmal because of all the challenges that Commissioner Kirkmeyer mentioned on top of survey fatigue, there's no reason that we would have to say that's invalid. We would have the option of saying this is valid or not based on what comes back.
Yeah, it would all, I guess that just is data that somebody that might have intentions to use it would use. I mean, it is what it is. You can't change it.
Yeah, and I would also probably want to plan to raise this with our corporation council as well to understand, because of course, other cities have seen surveys challenged, and so wanting to make sure that when we're discussing what that threshold is, thinking about that aspect as well.
Commissioner, would you go back a step? And this may address a
Back a
concern I
slide?
think Councilmember Lupian has as well.
Back a slide?
No.
Oh, okay.
You said, I'm not sure it's not in our best interest. You had a couple of negatives in the same sentence. What was
So we're all getting the same feedback, right, from landlords who are suffering in terms of financial distress in regards to rent. And Harvard, as part of City Rise, I think had 3 surveys that they sent out trying to ascertain, what is this rent debt that we're trying to cover. Monroe County is about to do a survey for that same purpose so that we can start to gauge, how does our 22 million rate in terms of what we hear. We're hoping that's a big response. So between that survey, which is really important from a budgetary perspective to know that, whatever we forecast the debt at, that we have a goal to reach that. And then shortly after that survey, we'll be introducing the rent assistance program, which landlords are going to want to play an active role in. So I know they're going to be shifting focus, and they're going to be solely focused on, how do they access the funds and how do they get in the process and what role can they play. And, I just don't want that to be a detriment to this effort. And I think that if we waited some period of time, whether it's 2 weeks or whatever, after the release and the start of the rent assistance, I think it will coincide better.
Councilmember Lupian, did you have an additional question or comment?
Yeah, I think so. I just wanted to clarify, when you said about that, wanting to position it when people are in the right place. I didn't know exactly what that meant, and if that meant additional timing or.
Well, I think it basically is, if we can eliminate that problem for the bulk of people, then I think they have more, it's a state of mind, right? I mean, it's part of this is a state of mind. I mean, when you answer a survey, what makes you answer a survey? Either a passion for the subject, or maybe it's how you feel that day. Right? I mean, it's honestly.
Yeah. I guess I don't understand how that translates into the flow of the process.
So what it would mean is if we start the rent assistance March 29th, then it would work out better if we started the survey after that. So a week after that, which we're talking about anyway, right? April 1st.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Let's go next. So Leah's going to talk about the Anti-Displacement Learning Network grant.
Okay, so the major purpose for the Anti-Displacement Learning Network in particular is reducing housing instability and increasing capacity for wealth building for Rochester's low-income households, particularly women of color with children who are disproportionately affected by displacement. I know you can all read, but it's almost our mission statement. And so it's just very important to really set that as the stage. We will carry that from the project all the way through the Housing Trust Fund. And so I just want you to keep that in your minds as we're discussing it now and moving forward. As a reminder, the planning team has staff from the Housing Department, Planning and Policy. Most of us are on this call. The Citywide Tenant Union, Catholic Family Center, and Jordan Health Center. We are strictly following guidelines that are set in place by the funder, which is Enterprise Community Partners and money coming directly from the Attorney General's office. Next slide, hooray. So the current status is that we are just about finished reviewing consultant RFP responses. We this week interviewed the top 2 applicants. We anticipate submission of the recommended consultant to you for approval in March. And then assuming that you agree with us about it, in April 2021, the consultant is going to do a lot of work, hopefully not over-surveying the people that we just talked about over-surveying. They will review a lot of the data that we already have. I mean, the nice thing about Rochester is we're collecting data all the time. So, they can review what we already have and then connect with many of the residents that, we have talked with before and that we really want, so that they can inform the potential activities and the best target populations to be served by this housing trust fund. They're going to do a full revenue study to assess and recommend the best potential sources. There may be one, there may be a few. The goal is for something that can sustainably and adequately fund a housing trust fund. If we get $600,000, that's wonderful, but that's not necessarily going to make an enormous impact. Wouldn't we like to have $6 million? They will provide research and analysis to develop for us a formal housing trust fund proposal with recommendations for effective programs, activities, how it should be structured in terms of governance, and then the administration. It isn't necessarily going to be run out of the city. As I said, we really want input and engagement and results from the communities that we're going to be serving. And that leads into over-surveying these folks, engaging the community as well as stakeholders to inform the planning and the development as well as the implementation. Don't worry, you also will be surveyed and have many opportunities for your input. Our hope is to have strategies and recommendations in the fall.
Any questions about that before we move to Mount Hope? Okay. So
sorry, just
go ahead.
one, Commissioner, if you don't mind.
Yep.
Just in terms of that process makes a lot of sense. I appreciate it. Is there a sense at this point of if I know you can't predict the recommendations, but is there going to be a lot of attempts to try to connect things to forces beyond our control, like at the state or federal level, or is it about trying to find ways to sustain and adequately fund things within our own kind of local control?
So go ahead.
I think the answer is it depends. The conversation that we had with our favorite consultant had a lot to do with how will we determine, can we influence things at the state level. There are several other cities in the Anti-Displacement Learning Network who are also looking at housing trust funds. Potentially we can, band together and, talk to the state and say, look, hey, let's do this together. But then if our goal is to really get it moving, we have to figure out the best way to get it moving. And maybe that's citywide and maybe that's county or statewide. Does that?
Yeah, no, thank you. It's very exciting. Appreciate it.
Okay. So again, I wanted to bring you up to speed on this and get it on your radar because it's quite likely that we might be coming before you for this in the near future. So we've been meeting with the Frederick Douglass Family Initiatives team led by Kenneth Morris and Robert Benz. And we've been meeting with them because they would love to build a Frederick Douglass Center for Justice, Knowledge, and Equality here in the city. And we've been talking to them for a while now about another parcel. And that parcel is not going to work out for a number of reasons, but they have a general interest in this parcel. And so from our perspective, there's a lot of reasons why that fits very well. Some of that involves what's on the parcel and the fact that it has some significant limitations in terms of residential development because of environmental and geotechnical challenges. Obviously, that's an ideal site for them and for this project. And they're looking at a long-term lease. They don't want to own it. They want to lease it. And really their desire is to get something solidified soon so they can begin a very aggressive fundraising effort, which they believe right now is a great time for them to kick that off. So the reason it's being mentioned today is it's quite possible that we come to you with a no RFP for this development. So I don't have really a lot more that I could say about it because I don't really have more to tell you today, but I just wanted you to have it on your radar.
But what does that mean? May require a no RFP process.
So we most often when we have city parcels, they are done through they're disposed of through an RFP process. And once in a while we do a direct sale. And when we do, we have to justify no RFP. So this might be one of those circumstances where we come to council and say, we didn't do an RFP and this is why. And it's kind of because of those reasons that I have, captured there and others.
I was trying to see, is there a building there?
No, there's no building
Okay.
there.
This is the spot right next to the Hamilton, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right next to what?
The
Well,
Hamilton?
it's next to, there's a city park-like area between the two, but yeah.
Right, and Time Warner.
Right,
Time
it's down there
Warner's
by
on
Spectrum. Yeah, that big open lot area. So I know the neighborhood, the South Wedge folk had intense interest. So where are they with this consideration?
This is a really recent conversation. We just shifted to this property. Again, we only have quarterly work sessions, so I didn't want to lose the opportunity to bring it before you and make sure it's on your radar. We certainly will start that process. The team is going through some due diligence and have to make sure that they can make this parcel work for those, challenges that are listed there. Once they believe that can happen, then that's the next step, is to engage the community and make sure there's support for it.
Okay.
Okay. So the only other slide we have is, I know, again, Josanna mentioned that you all, or some of you, wanted to have development process on a topic in a future work session. So I just wanted to seek some clarity on that, like what specifically about the development process do you want to learn about? Are there other topics that you want to talk about? I mean, we're going to have some definite things that we put on the next agenda, including like an update on the zoning rewrite and things like that. But if you have topics.
Commissioner, I'd like to bring a topic. At our last Speak to Council session, we had one of our constituents came over and they were talking about the building blocks and how we have all of these properties that don't have C of O's. And so, I'd like to kind of get an update or have a conversation around that. I would hope that some of the information that was shared that night seemed very, I hope that the right information is being put out there. So I just want to get some facts around the C of O process and how many properties are actually, we don't have C of O's or and what and why and what are we doing about it, et cetera.
All right. I appreciate that question. This is my passion, and I don't need time to wait to answer that question.
Wonderful.
So here's the challenge, and here's where most people have shied away from going out where we have gone, in the space that we have gone in terms of data to the public. There's real accountability when you start pushing data out to the public. The challenge there is, with our old antiquated mainframe system, you're limited in what you can send out, right? All you can send out is C of O, there's an open case, there's this many violations. You can't really tell much more than that. So in code enforcement, you can never oversimplify or overgeneralize a statement based on those kind of data points. And this is what I mean by that. There's always, we do 4,000 plus C of Os a year. So let's just say that number's at about 4,400. There's always thousands of people going through the process. The process is built, and the structure of code enforcement is built on the assumption that if you're not progressing satisfactorily, then you're going to be the recipient of enforcement mechanisms that consist of things like tickets, sometimes vacate orders, sometimes court. And so there's going to be that activity going on too. So you can't just look at a case and say, the C of O is expired. That's not good. It's not good if there's somebody living in a hazard. I agree. So where we have to be able to do a better job in the new system is being able to paint the whole picture, not part of the picture. That doesn't mean we shied away from painting the picture as it's situated today. That was our choice. We chose to do that because we want that accountability. We want city staff to understand that they're accountable to the public for their work activity. And there is no higher level accountability than pushing data out to the public because everybody can access it. So what I would say is the number that you should be looking at, the number that should be of interest to people is the KPI data number that we report in terms of how many, if you want to know what the challenges are of units, people living in units, and I don't care if it's a single family or a 50-unit building, that's where we report how many rental units are code compliant today. And that's a number that's automated. Nobody makes it up. That's factual data that comes out of the system, and it's automated and updated every day. So if we have a goal of 90% of the rental units being in code compliance and we're meeting and exceeding that goal, that's where our focus is. If we have a C of O case, and I'm not saying there aren't C of O cases that are dragging on longer than they should be, my goal and my objective would be, well, are they being appropriately ticketed? Are they on their way to court? But you also have to understand that we have an operation that operates with we're serving both tenants, neighborhoods, and landlords in the process. So we operate in a customer-oriented manner. So if you are abating hazards in a timely manner and committing to a work plan that's reasonable, we're going to facilitate the process in that kind of customer-oriented way. That if that means you take 9 months to get a C of O, that's okay. As long as you mitigated hazards quickly and then have a work plan and progress accordingly, then that's what's expected of you. And, with an 88% voluntary compliance rate, I think that, we have a really solid base of landlords that do that. Now, you throw on the challenges of the pandemic, that's certainly going to have impacts. That's going to have lots of impacts because when you start talking about rent that's owed, when you start talking about taxes that are owed, and you start talking about you still have to maintain the property, we have to sort of make sure that we're acting in accordance and aligned with those expectations, which have to be altered. Quite frankly, they have to be. Now, they're not altered in terms of habitability. They're not altered in terms of safeness, but they're certainly altered in terms of cooperative, extensions of time. They have to be. Anything else would be unreasonable. And we don't want to have, you can look around the country if you want, spend some time. And if you want to look at a robotic, aggressive enforcement process, you'll find some places that aren't doing very well. Don't forget, we're still issuing 4,800 tickets a year.
So is there any expectation, because a part of the concern also is the extreme length of time that some of the properties are without a C of O?
Yeah, that's always a concern. So the way that is hopefully going to be addressed better in the future is because our system will be able to flag that stuff, right? Right now we have 26 inspectors managing 350 cases apiece. So they're processing and they know where their pain points are, but how many pain points can you address in an 8-hour day? How many pain points can you take to court when we're limited to 3 cases a month and we can barely meet that obligation. So it's about being able to prioritize the right properties. That's where land management is really going to serve us well, is going to be able to tell us where those pain points should be. And if we get some expanded access to court, then we can certainly, have those cases expedited in that manner. But what we don't want to lose, and what is more successful than court, quite frankly, is our adjudication process that's in place now. Now, does it work for every case? No, not. If you're walking away from a property, I doubt court's going to help, because you probably won't show up for court, but the ticketing certainly not going to help. So there's a lot of different dynamics that come into play. On average, I think people process C of Os in a reasonable time, but that's on average. So there's always going to be people that violate that expectation, and there's going to be people that exceed it. And as long as we are ticketing the properties that should be ticketed, then, that's the extent of our authority. We can't, we can only do what our limited authority allows us to do. And that's to ticket and take 3 cases a month to city court.
Commissioner, that may be a great segue into a topic for next time. But hopefully there's some more clarity around the housing court as well. I know that there's a lot of moving parts to this, but because of message of home rule and everything that has to happen at the state level. But essentially what I just heard from you is that the city there's only so many levers that we can possibly pull in a very complex situation. And if in fact we had potentially some more direct communication with city court and the folks who are ultimately handling a lot of the cases related to eviction, there might be an opportunity to actually expedite some of this stuff and create some more streamlined processes. And I'm hopeful that we can talk about how we get to design some of that stuff collectively. Maybe that can be a topic for the next session.
Yeah, absolutely. It may be a little premature, but we can certainly capture what our interests and concerns may be with that. One thing I will caution you, though, is I would never use the word expedite in court in the same reference statement, because it's not expedited. Court is a lengthy process. It's a manually intensive process, and it requires attorneys. And we're going to need more if we have more cases going to court.
Commissioner,
Understood.
can you explain to me, and maybe I've missed this, why why you're constricted to 3 cases per month?
So we, first of all, we just recently, over the last, 2 or 3 years, got that access to court, city court. And in our agreement with court, that was part of the agreement, is that, we would bring no more than 3 cases a month. It's kind of a balancing of priorities, not only for us, it's really about the court, and it's about our legal assistance. I'm not going to speak for Tim, but they have a lot of stress points, and these things are time consuming, because as much as the uninformed thinks things get resolved in court, I see the same duration of time for conclusion. I see adjournments. I see 6 months down the road, people did X, Y, and Z. Every month they do 1 thing, 2 things, and court keeps going. So it's not, there is no golden bullet here. Let me just say that. It's part of the solution. It is not the solution. And if you want to think it's the solution, talk to the cities who have nothing but court and would love to have municipal code violation bureau and add the tax fines. Love.
So, Commissioner, thank you for the extended information around that. And I agree with Councilmember Gruber that I would like to see a more extensive conversation on this, because I'm trying to figure out ways that we can collaborate together to, come up with more innovative ways where we can be more helpful in the entire process, right? So I think there's always room for improvement. And I just would want to make sure that we're doing on the council side, from the legislative side and advocacy side, when it comes to advocating on the state level, that we're doing everything that we can do to be assisting. And I understand for 26 people to have 350 cases, that's a lot, I get that. However, if there's things that we can do in the process that could help make those individuals' jobs better or easier, then, I just want to explore that.
I appreciate that. Yeah, and some of the things we're doing right now are going to help that, right? Land management will help that. If we license property managers, that's going to help that. All of these things collectively have an impact. Expansion of court will help that. So it's the collective effort of all of those opportunities that we really need to have successful code enforcement. It's not, our hazard abatement policy that we have in place now helps it. Not as much as people thought it was going to be, because the truth is, once we get to the point where we tell them we're coming out tomorrow to fix it, it gets fixed. Because, when people know that you're going to get a bill and the bill might be higher if we do it than when you do it, they're going to do it. So that's why we didn't, remember back when we talked about that, that's why we didn't want to commit more than 200,000 to begin with, because we know how people act. But I think there's some good things coming down the pipe to strengthen that, and really to support the staff, the public servants that are really working really hard to make a difference in the community. These systems will help them. When we can score property owners, managers, properties, that gives the public a real perception of, well, if you're entertaining living somewhere, would you not want to know what the situation is with that owner, with that manager, with that property? It's all going to be public.
Commissioner Kirkmeyer?
Yeah.
I'm glad you brought up the property management licensing and this idea of scoring. And, I believe it's Minneapolis that actually licenses landlords. And my husband was a contractor, and he actually worked for some landlords and property management companies. But a lot of times what the property management can only do what the landlords authorize. And a lot of times, landlords will look for these property management companies that maybe aren't great, but don't have necessarily the standards. And there are property management companies that won't work with certain landlords because they don't authorize the right repairs. And wouldn't it be maybe more effective to actually license landlords?
No, so let me tell you how this will play out, because this happens right now in our refuse environment. So we absolutely agree, and we understand those dynamics. So this is the way it will shape out. Property managers are going to be judged based on their inventory that they're listed for. If property manager A, if the owner A is not supporting property manager B for that investment, they're not putting in the money, then our message to that property manager is you need to sever your ties with that person, because they're not doing the right thing, and you're going to be accountable to it just like they are. They're already accountable because we can ticket the owner. So the manager is going to sever. Now, what do you think the opportunity for that owner is going to be over the course of 2 years when they exhaust their means? Because there won't be any of the type of managers that you just described over time. They won't be in business, because over time they won't be able to be in business because of their score and their inability to raise that score. So over time, it's going to force landlords to either invest properly in their property or don't come here. Don't come here from afar, because the expectations you might not be prepared to meet. And that's okay. It's going to have some ramifications, a little bit like the lead ordinance did, where it didn't cause massive abandonment, but some people made some decisions, business decisions, that they should have made years before that, because they weren't prepared to meet the expectations they let. Now, thank goodness that 90% of the landlords met the expectation, but there was a population that weren't willing to meet the and that's fine. Move on. Go invest in some other city. That's fine with us. We have a good, solid base of local investors, and we're quite confident that if some people don't want to invest here, we know we have a lot of people that do, because these processes protect their investment. So there's positive reinforcement here for people to invest, but over time, and I think it's going to happen over a 2 or 3 year period, you will see that both that type of manager will no longer, we had some people in the lead clearance environment that we had to suspend multiple times. They finally, so we looked at them and I said, this is not for you. This is not for you. You are not passing our expectations. And they stopped because they knew they couldn't do it. Same thing's going to happen with managers and property owners that want to invest from afar, that don't want to truly invest. They're not going to be here for long.
I guess it just seems kind of like, I don't know how to exactly say it, but just not direct. You know, if a landlord is not investing appropriately in the property, it's the landlord who, you know, maybe they're in the wrong business.
Right, but we already have a mechanism to go after them. That's ticketing, and that's, you know, all tax foreclosure, and I mean, we have a lot of weapons against owners. We don't have any leverage with property managers. So what happened?
True, but when we get into court, you know, we're at the discretion of the judge, and that's a difficult road to go too, right?
For owners or managers?
For owners.
I mean, it depends on if it's an owner from afar, you got to go to state Supreme Court. Does state Supreme Court care as much as city court? I don't know. Probably not. I mean, we used to go to state Supreme Court in the 80s, and we got out of state Supreme Court because we didn't feel supported.
It just seems harder to actually hold the landlords accountable.
I think that this will be effective. I believe it will. I know Minneapolis. I presented with Kelly. She runs their code enforcement operation there. I presented with her multiple times nationally. I know their program well. I will tell you that Kelly is very envious of our program. And so I appreciate the sentiment, but we have looked at and investigated that as well as, you know, every other program pretty much there is.
Understand, thanks.
Okay, so we're at the end of our time allotment. Are there additional comments or questions or concerns or anything somebody wants to share?
President Scott, just one thing, Commissioner, yes. For future subjects along the same lines, I'd like to know a little bit more about eminent domain and in what circumstances that can be used, especially for long-term vacancies that could be better utilized by another owner, as well as just an understanding of the land management software and what efficiencies you feel you'll gain from that process.
Okay, appreciate that. We'll have those on the list.
Can I add receivership to that list?
Yep.
Add what, please?
Receivership?
Receivership.
Yeah, we'll make sure Corporation Counsel joins us for that session.
Okay, is that it?
I have one question real quick. Commissioner Kirk.
Councilmember Pio?
Pio, yes, okay. Thank you. In terms of the city home purchase grants, I just talked with someone and they stated they're on Social Security, so they don't make very much money. So they wanted to add their parents on as a co-borrower, but we don't, as a city, we won't give them a grant for if the mother already owns a home. They're just trying to help their daughter with purchasing. Is there something we can?
What kind of grant were they trying to get?
The HPAP, home purchase assistance, $3,000 grant.
If you want to send an email, we'll look into it. I don't know specifically off the top of my head, but if you want to send us an email, we'll look into it.
Okay, and do we have any idea if we're going to be updating and going digital for that application system for the home grant?
I mean, we want to take everything digital. It's, we're trying incrementally. I mean, honestly, land management will take us there eventually in every area. Right now, it'll be focused on buildings and zoning because that's our biggest pain point, code enforcement. But literally every application process in NBD, we hope to eventually get incorporated into an electronic process through land management.
All right, thank you.
All right, so I think that's it. If we're all set, I will declare this meeting adjourned. Thank you all so much for joining us, and thank you for the very useful information. We look forward to chatting